So the session is officially being recorded now. So welcome to all of you. If you're not on the session and you're listening to it after, we're doing this at least now every Sunday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Just drop me an email with OEN Zoom in the subject heading, and I'll give you the link to get into the next one. So where do we be? We usually start off a little slow and then it starts really cooking. I don't think that the 4 Arrows is going to make it tonight. He's got a class. He's teaching a new class that starts tonight. He said he might make it if it gets done soon. So any observations, anything you've seen, anything you haven't seen? I posted it on my Instagram account. I saw a woman standing on the street holding a sign, basically looking for donations, for money, begging. And the sign said, "Can't pay my bills." Now, I've seen people before who have been begging, saying homeless, saying can't find a job, things like that. But I've never seen one where it was somebody like that. That was a first for me.
Well, you know, in emergencies, people become very ingenious, including the beggars on the street.
Yeah, well, that may be too. She didn't look like the average beggar, though. She just didn't. I don't know.
I met somebody like that outside my co-op before the virus with a very neatly lettered, colorful sign. And I walked up to her and gave her $10 and said, "Thanks for doing this." And she looked at me strangely and said, "What?" And I said, "Well, somebody's got to do this job." And I was about to walk away, and she said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, we have an economy that's structured so that about 20% of us get bumped off the shelf. And if that doesn't happen, the economy will collapse." And she looked really, really thoughtful.
And it's so true. I mean, the economy is designed so that a lot of people are poor, who are even homeless.
It's structured that way.
And
Rob, I have something about your financial situation and a lot of journalists' situation, and I want to tie it into Michael Moore's and Jeff Gibbs' Planet of the Humans, and where Bill McKibben gets slammed and Sierra Club gets slammed for taking money from places like the Rockefellers and other big funders of solar energy, which I personally have lots of problems with, just full disclosure. With all renewables, for me, it's not renewable given the amount of energy it takes to manufacture these things and the amount of rare earths.
That was an eye-opener watching the video, seeing that. And you had already primed me to be ready for it.
Yeah, it's well, and they take you to second grade with it. There's a lot that isn't in the film, but I have to say, I don't see how Bill McKibben could create an organization like 350.org without big money. And so, and you know, I'm sitting here with tons of information and I have no money. And so that limits my effectiveness, or the effectiveness of distributing the information that I've been given. And, you know, and here you are with a really large website where people are turning to it all the time, and there's no funding. And so we do need to relook at how do we survive here? How do we get information out effectively? And what I'm told about that is you've got to be tweeting, you've got to be on Instagram, you've got to be doing social media. And personally, I have no interest in that. And so that means hiring somebody, and that means money, and you know, you need a small army and all that stuff. So I'm just saying, yeah, that person on the street corner is us, and it all cycles together, and how do we get funding for what's really worthwhile here,
You
so
have
that
to
we don't have to take it from the Koch brothers?
you have to be having Zoom meetings.
Well, and that is basically giving your money to telecommunications infrastructure,
Well,
and
keep them under
it's
45 minutes. Zoom is free. I've been paying for
but
Zoom
the
for a
equipment
couple of
is
years.
the equipment and the infrastructure is where I'm going with it, and then you can't do it. There's no such thing as a green, clean way to do this. If people are not on video, that uses less data and less energy and emits
Well,
less
I was
CO2 and all
going
that
to
stuff.
I was going to suggest sitting around a campfire, but that documentary also criticized burning of wood too. So
Communicate by smoke signals?
burning wood.
That pollutes the air.
We need to restructure the economy. I mean, nothing's going to change in this situation. It's only going to get worse until the entire economic capitalistic system comes down. That's really where we're at. It's capitalism run amok, and it's destroying the world, and it's destroying human relationships, and it's going to have to change.
And what do you think is going to replace it?
I think something a little, certainly not a money system. I think we're going to have to go back to, because, you know, if you think about it critically, money is just a way to communicate. It's a way, it's an idea of value and trust.
Protected speech.
Yeah. Well, now it's been turned into protected speech of all fucking things. But I mean, the fact of the matter is money is just an agreement between people on the value of something, and the real value of stuff is work. I mean, I hate to say it, but Mark said it right the first time. It's about the only value that we have is our labor. So we're going to have some kind of a system that recognizes that, and that lets people renew our trust in each other again. Because money's not it.
May I make a comment, please? I don't know if any of you heard the latest Bob Dylan song, Murder Most Foul, about the Kennedy assassination. Yeah. Well, I was reading an article today that said, you know, here Dylan is bringing our attention to the fact that something that happened, 60 years ago, was essentially a coup d'etat. Right. And we all just ignored it and went on to play whatever social games and cultural games were made available, and just ignored that an enormous tragedy occurred, you know, an assault on our whole system of government, and we just ignored it. And so if we're going to ignore something of that magnitude, why should we care about anything else?
Yeah, hello. So, Rob, have you ever interviewed James Douglas? He wrote this book, JFK and the Unspeakable, and it's recommended by Ellsberg, Daniel Ellsberg, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and others. But he says that Kennedy was killed by the CIA because Kennedy was trying to make peace with Russia, Cuba, and Vietnam, and also the
civil rights
pissed off the steel industry by opposing their raising the prices, and so he gives a lot of evidence to that. I don't know if it's true, but it sounds plausible. He gives a lot of evidence that Kennedy, well, he was somewhat mixed, but Kennedy was making peace overtures, and he realized that the Cold War was going to cause disaster.
Well, it makes me think of two things. One, Op-Ed News was really privileged to have a true world expert on the Kennedy assassination, Jerry Polikoff. And Jerry was in a car accident and killed in early March. It's really tragic.
Yeah.
You know, that book talks about, when I saw another list of dozens of people associated with the JFK assassination who mysteriously died. There were a lot of people who knew something about it, ended up dying under mysterious circumstances.
Well, the other thing that it makes me think about what you're talking about is the fact that the CIA is just as malevolent now as it was then.
Well, it's more than that. The suggestion is that Allen Dulles engineered the assassination, and he really had the ability, he had the skill, and he had the contacts to put together an assassination that would not be observed by anybody. And he needed Johnson's permission. And the critical thing is that, at least as it's been suggested in a number of books and articles that I've read, is that Johnson was complicit in all of this. And, you know, if that is even partially true, and that we've ignored it, it says something about us. You know, that
May I speak up?
Sure.
My name is Meredith.
Hi, Meredith.
Hi. I have, of course, been giving a whole lot of thought to the situation we're in with one catastrophe after another hanging over our heads, and why this is happening. What does it mean? What can be done about it? What can we do about it? And of course, I don't have any answers, but I do see some aspects of the problem that are not necessarily obvious to all of us. I see the problem as in large part, ethical, moral, and spiritual. And what I mean by that is what are really oh gosh, I'm sorry, I'm at a loss for words here. I was taking a nap and I'm not altogether awake, I don't think. Anyway,
Moral, spiritual, and ethical. What would? How's that?
Well, yeah. What I mean is, I've just finished reading Edward Snowden's book, A Permanent Record, and his perspective seems to be less ideological than it is ethical. He doesn't strike me so much as an ideologue as a person who knows the difference between right and wrong. And I think as far as I can tell, our government, which is, what I mean by that is the deep state.
That's our government.
But not only that, but the whole culture is really completely without moral compass, as far as I can tell. It's all based on greed and consumerism, and certainly our economy is like that. And to hell with the poor, and to hell with the outsider, to hell with the I think about I don't want to come across here as holier than thou or anything like that. I'm really not like that, but I can't help but think about Jesus's words about when I was naked, you clothed me not. When I was hungry, you fed me not, and so forth. We don't feed the hungry. We don't clothe the naked. We don't visit the people in prison or even treat them as human beings, or the strangers or the outsiders. We persecute all of those people, and we don't lift a finger for them. I mean, as a society.
Sure.
I don't mean as every individual, but I mean as a society. We seem to lack any sort of moral underpinning at all. And I think about ancient societies a lot, and what we might have to learn from them, and what history can teach us. And I just see, I don't remember reading about or learning about any society that was as completely godless, if I can put it that way, as completely godless as we are as a people. It's almost, well, certainly for for those who are in power right now, it certainly is an amorality that just anything goes. And not only that, but as a society, nobody's going to be held accountable. And the person on the street who sells a cigarette that he's not supposed to sell gets killed. And the person in power, the rich and the powerful, commit horrible, massive atrocities worldwide.
That's right.
And there's no accountability
That's right.
whatsoever. And that just seems to have become the norm. And so I see that aspect, and I think that nothing's going to really change until our moral perspective changes, until our spiritual condition changes. And actually, I'm speaking as someone who doesn't even go to church. I'm speaking as an observer, of American society and other societies.
I think there are huge problems with religions today. I think the religions we see today
Can be attributed to what we're going through.
They're designed to exploit people. They're designed to, and they use the believers to get messages across. I just did an interview just a couple weeks ago with an author of a book about how the right has exploited religion, tens of millions of people, so that they basically vote against their own interests.
Rob, I don't think Meredith was talking about religion. I think she was talking about social cohesion in this country in general.
No, I think she's talking about God and godlessness. She's talking about spirituality, and what I'm trying to say is that religion has divorced itself from those things.
Yes, yeah.
Someone is no longer Christianity; it's churchianity.
Churchianity.
Yeah.
Seems to me that everybody wants to be talking about why everything's like it is. And the easiest place to go is who done it. And but I think there's other things to look at. Like today, when the power went out, it was a big kick. It's like, whoa, what if this stays like this?
Yeah.
What happens to all this worldwide conversation that's going on?
We assume that we will always have electricity 24 hours a day.
Well, no, but we can't assume that. We don't anyway over here. But the other thing is, we've all escaped into this video conferencing medium, and we're face to face more than ever in history. And the machine that makes it possible is set up to divide us into little markets of one, so we can be herded around and made to elect people and buy stuff. It'd be consumers. So we each have our own worldview because we're deluged with impressions from these screens. So this machine is now clogged because we're exchanging something that it can't calculate. Yeah. Even with like face recognition and micro-expression analysis and voice print readers.
I'm a junior member here, guys, but could I just chime in for one thing? Because I really agree with what Meredith said. She mentioned Edward Snowden. I think he's basically saying that ideology in itself is one of the problems we're dealing with today. Solzhenitsyn, I think, said, man can kill man individually, but it takes ideology to get man to kill man by the millions.
Yeah.
So, and that sort of ties into the social cohesion thing. I mean, ideology is to a large extent being used to divide us. Right against left, Republican against Democrat. In my country, New Democrat against liberal, which are basically the same here. So I think that all ties in together. And I think it's not that ideology is useless, it's good, but once it's elevated to the point of a religion, it can become dangerous. Anyway, that's my comment for today.
I think that there's for me at least, there's lots to be learned, as I said before, from other situations and other periods in history. another work that I read, well, I have read it several times, is that I find extremely important even today in our situation is the writings of Václav Havel. Disturbing the Peace is one of his books, of course. And the whole idea of living in truth. And I do see, he's a philosopher. He was a philosopher as well as a playwright. And I see him as someone who was seeking, spent much of his life seeking ways to, at least for himself as one person, what can I do to bring down this massive system, this all-encompassing political system that all of us feel powerless in the presence of. And his answer was living in truth. Of course, that's a very complex idea, and I'm not going to go into it here. I'm sure probably most of you in this meeting have read his works, but I think it has, I don't know the obvious application to today, but I do think that living in truth is an ethical position. I think it's a moral and spiritual position, and we need that as a basis for any direction we go in. And I also think about Sophocles' play Antigone, where the message at that time, Socrates' message to the Greeks seems to be that earthly power, political power, should never put itself above the law of the gods.
That's it. That's it. It's Sophocles, not Socrates, but that's the main meme of it.
What did I say? Sophocles?
You said Socrates.
Oh no, Sophocles.
Yeah. That's okay. It's a marvel. It's an amazing play. It's utterly one of my favorites.
Mine too. And thank you for the correction.
Oh, I studied it in grad school, so no excuse not to correct it.
Anyway, but in trying to come up with some overarching meaning for what's happening now, my mind has produced something a little strange. I'll just tell you what it is, for whatever it's worth. I think I'm becoming a pagan. I think about how long we have abused Mother Earth, Gaia, and how we've exploited, we as human beings, the human race, how we've exploited and abused and had no reverence for Mother Earth. And I think that the Native Americans have a lot to teach us along those lines. But she has been so patient for generation after generation after generation. She's been patient, waiting for us, giving us a chance to repent and reorient ourselves in relation to the rest of life on Earth and the source of our life on Earth. And yet we haven't been able to. And I think she's taken matters into her own hands and said, okay, I'm going to act to save myself and my own creation. And now, this virus is loose. And this is a fantasy, of course, that I'm describing, but it's what came into my mind. And I think there's some truth behind it somewhere. That I take from this little scenario that I just came up with. I take from that a certain small comfort in knowing that the animals are moving back into the national forests that were theirs at one time, that the stars shine at night again over the cities. It's possible to see the heavens.
Yes.
And these are good things. These are good things. And maybe, I don't know, maybe our human civilization that we have constructed is not such a good thing. And, but I don't think we're going to be able to turn things around without a massive overhaul of the capitalist system.
Okay, Meredith, we go for about an hour and 15 minutes usually, and we got to give other people a chance. You've given us a lot of food for thought, and I see a lot of people shaking their heads yes. So what do you all think?
Yes.
How many people have to die? Look how many people are having to die for the blue sky to come out and the stars to shine at night.
I think that we're going to have massive permanent change because of this. I mean, I think that real estate is going to be something that in many ways becomes obsolete. Giant buildings at universities and giant corporate towers are insane expenses that we now realize we don't need anymore. And we can cut back on our use of so much energy and resources. And that's something that has been given to us as a gift, I think, by this situation.
You think everybody's going to work from home? All this online stuff?
Well, a lot of people are liking it. I mean, my daughter had to work at home until she was furloughed, but she hated it. So she wants to go back to working. But I think more than half the people who have been made to work at home like it better. So that could happen. Big time.
Over the short term, I could see how people would like it better. But over the long term, it's the most isolating thing. I mean, talk about being reduced to just yourself with no connection to anybody else. That's what this online thing is.
Well, I agree. And I think that what it shows is, but I mean, I'm connecting with people, not face to face. I can't wait to do that.
How much of a connection is it really?
Well,
a lot of people prefer being isolated.
Yeah. And the younger generation, they don't even want to talk on the phone. They want to text.
But when you become that isolated,
Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp.
When you become that isolated, you stop caring. The reason I brought up Bob Dylan and the JFK assassination is that nobody really cared. And we're so divided today. We're divided religiously or sectionally, ethnically, in so many ways. It's becoming to a point where people don't care.
I have to disagree. I think that it's not just a matter of people not caring. I mean, when the ideas that this was other than Lee Harvey Oswald alone doing this assassination, people treated it any other idea like people were crazy, like these were conspiracy theories. And the mainstream media plays a major role in shutting down any conversation outside of the approved message. That's one of the reasons that I think that op-ed news offers a different perspective, and the alternative media do that. The mainstream media are incredibly damaging, and they're really doing a lot of the job that I think you're talking about. It's not just not caring, it's not thinking, it's not paying attention, it's ignoring all the other possible answers and possible ways that things have happened. But there's three of us who have taken up most of the time, and I want to give other people a chance to talk too.
I think you're absolutely right. That's it. It's not that people don't care, it's that they don't know. And that's the problem with the mainstream media. It's so much disinformation out there so much disinformation around the JFK assassination. That's a perfect point. People didn't know. So how can people care about anything if they don't know what the situation is?
And then you get people like Chuck Todd, and these are people who are like leading media figures who attack anybody who gives an alternative way of describing things. Like Chuck Todd, over the years, has been viciously attacking people in the election integrity movement who suggest that there are any problems with electronic voting or any other issues of voting. So he's a major player, and those are the powerful people who are given the power by the networks to shut down any other conversations.
Exactly.
Did anyone notice Piketty's documentary on his book was just released? And I read a review of it in The Intercept, and he mentions that really a significant amount of the system is kept from most voters, and he called it social silence. That's one of the things that I've found. I remember, for example, I was wrongly taught in law school how corporations work.
Which book are you talking about?
It's Piketty's book, Capitalism in the 21st Century.
Thomas Piketty.
Thomas Piketty, the French economist. There's a documentary that summarizes the book, and I think it's being shown in certain locations right now, and I assume it's going to come to Netflix soon.
For something that was a bestseller, not too many people have read it.
Well, that's exactly it. But because it's an economist, he's an academic, and he puts in all these charts and graphs and things. It's hard to make through the whole book. But his premise, and it's a long book. It's up in the book, but in the documentary, evidently, he's now focusing on all of the aspects of our system never properly explained, of our financial system, they're never properly explained. And that's one of the things that I ran into myself when I'm now sort of semi-retired, but I was at a large international law firm, and I started to say, my God, only the advisors to the 1% of the 1% understand this part of the system. So when these people write about it, they can never get to what the real problem is.
Yeah.
I was glad to see him saying that that is a problem. Sort of like Catalina was saying, I suppose, too, about the environment, but it's about our financial system, our corporate and our tax system. There's so much of it that is absolutely kept from the average voter.
One of the problems is economics. Economics is a really screwed up, distorted science. It's not a science. It's set up as a very rigid, constricted trade or something where only certain journals are okay. And most economists really don't get what's going on. They base their ideas on a collection of models that really don't work. And I interviewed a guy about 2 years ago who is a rogue economist. And he basically said that, if you want to make it as an economist, you got to toe the line, and you've got to live within these strictures that are just not reality. So that's where our leaders get their advice. Larry Summers and people like that.
One of the worst, absolutely. But Piketty is breaking the mold. That's the point. But the mainstream economists, whether they call themselves Democrats or Republicans, you're absolutely right. They belong to one school, and they're the deregulation people. And it was the deregulation that caused the 2008 crisis. But they were kept in place to do Dodd-Frank, which has done absolutely nothing. You notice income inequality continued from 1970 right through to today, and Dodd-Frank did nothing to help because the economists wrote it. And it's you know, if you know anything about how the system works, because the economists don't, quite frankly, that's one of the things they do not understand. I watch even Krugman. He doesn't understand some of the basic things of how the financial system.
I think the Dodd-Frank was watered down by intense lobbying, by political pressure. There were some decent regulations in there, but they were removed.
The only thing, Dodd-Frank was 1,000 pages. The only thing in there were the Volcker rules, which I agree were watered down. And the Volcker rules, as I'm sure everybody understands, was the problem that the banks no longer do what we think banks do. We think that they make loans to businesses, or if they're commercial banks, or if they're investment banks, they help businesses sell stocks. They don't. They bet among themselves. And that was the problem. That's why their bonuses are so high.
That's true. It's the top 20% against the lower 80%. Whether you're working in law or medicine or anything else, you're essentially working for the top 20% of income earners. And the lower 80% we ignore. And classical economics works for the top 20% of income earners. And if you're an economist and you want a job, it's the top 20% who are going to hire you.
It's ironic that the so-called essential workers are the ones who are generally paid the least.
Yeah.
Yeah, the film Inside Job, 1908 exposition of how the collapse was engineered, revealed that Wall Street basically funds, or elements of Wall Street basically funds all the Ivy League institutions, and they determine the curriculum. And whether it's, you know, in medicine or economics or whatever it may be, you're only going to teach this model. Anything else is out.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Same with law.
We're coming, you know, we're being dumbed down. I mean,
well, don't forget that the Koch brothers have also been spending millions and millions of dollars endowing different university programs. So it's
a group, I mean, you know.
You want to talk? I can't right now. I'm on this meeting.
I'm good.
I keep having this thought that
if I'm getting noise from people, I'm gonna mute you, and you'll have to unmute yourself if you want to talk. Okay?
Am I on?
Yeah, you're back.
You're back. You're good.
I've been working with Howard Richards, who's an economist of many years, and he does first of all, his economics is based on the ground as lived. You know, I visited him in Chile, and we walked up to the corner, and there was a guy selling fly swatters, and he was really glad to see Howard. Well, Howard turns out to have been supplying with fly swatters to sell, so the guy would have a job. So Howard's understanding of these things gets down to the bone, but he just talks about human survival depends on the confidence of investors that they're going to make a profit out of their investment. And that's down to the only way for you to get a job is if somebody's going to get rich off you.
Yeah.
And the problem is jobs are disappearing for technical reasons as well as everything else.
That's right.
But he goes back to Roman law with this stuff and very detailed history, pointing out
we have
there's no obligation to buy anything. There's freedom to sell what you want to sell. So you could sell your labor, you could sell chunks of your life to get money to eat, but nobody's obligated to buy your labor. So that's this big hole out of which drains everybody, 20% of the population.
One of the realities that we're facing is that with the development of technology and all this online communication and all this stuff, we don't need unskilled labor. We don't need most of the lower 80% of the labor force.
Right. So we have to change this whole paradigm of if you don't work, you don't eat.
The pragmatic right wing And you know, I don't. It's not just the Koch brothers because doing what they're doing because they're evil. They have a very clear strategy. The political right has pursued its objectives with a lot more intelligence than has the political left. They have a clear strategy, and they're implementing that strategy, and they're winning. We have nothing. The best we can come up with is Joe Biden.
I didn't come up with Joe Biden.
And that's
what you got to do.
But what the
I wanted Bernie.
Right, but please, let me just finish this. It's a brief point. What the political right sees is that if they can push away the lower 80%, after all the tax revenues that are generated come from the top 20%. All the programs for which the tax revenues finance could go to the lower 80%. And what they're saying is that if we can push away a substantial portion of the lower 80% and then leave a viable economy for the rest of us.
Yeah, but nothing grows if it doesn't get water and nutrients, you know, even evil stuff. It's got to have an environmental niche in which to thrive.
Well,
and that's the
you
structural.
You look at
stuff.
what happened with those trillions and trillions of dollars that have been released in the last 2 months. We're going to find out that most of those went to big corporations and wealthy people. You know that.
Clear.
That's exactly right.
So the water's happening, but it's pissing on us, and all the good stuff is going to that top 20 or 10 or 2%.
So you can't change a paradigm from inside it. You got to create a new paradigm.
Actually, the opposite is
What he said.
Is it what's his name? He wrote Pedagogy of the Oppressed.
Paulo Freire.
Pablo Freire, yeah. You know, he said the only way to change it is from the inside. All right, we got
There's a little bit of apples and oranges in that one.
Donnie, I think you got to mute yourself if you're.
Yeah, you saw the meme. There was a meme saying that if capitalism is so great, why does it keep needing to be bailed out? We have to bail out the corporations every 10 years.
Yeah, because it's only great for a very small percentage of people.
That's right. But that's a powerful percentage.
Yes. Could I just make one point on Thomas Piketty? I hate to get back to maybe that boring topic, but I'm one of the boring guys who actually read the book cover to cover. And it seems to me one of the main core themes in it is that the fundamentalism of capitalism is flawed. And he uses a very simple equation. R is greater than G. The return to the capitalist class is greater than the growth rate. And I think his theme is that it inevitably leads to a concentration of wealth. And the only way you can remedy that, and this is what he recommends, is a taxation on capital, on excess capital. At least that's my takeaway. Does anyone else have the same takeaway?
Throughout all of history, the top 1% have always controlled everything. Going back to the Roman Empire, it was the top 1% that controlled everything. All through the medieval period, it was the top 1% that controlled everything.
I just want to mention something. Harvey Branscombe just posted a comment in chat that is really good. Harvey, you should write that up as an article. Take a look at it if you haven't seen it. What's in the chat there, and if you want to talk about it, talk about it. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Hugh, but we've got not that much time left, and you and me and Peter and Meredith have taken up most of the time, and I want to give Don. I want to give other people a chance to talk. So, Harvey, you want to talk about what you posted there? Unmute yourself, or maybe not. It's Stan.
Can you say what he says?
You click on chat and read it.
Shall I read it out loud?
Bill Holman's is here.
Who?
Bill Holman's.
Bill Holman?
William P. Holman's. Yeah, I made it.
Oh, you're Bill. That's Bill. Okay, good, Bill. Good.
Yeah, I made it on the phone. I couldn't make it on the computer.
Well, glad you're here.
Well, all I wanted to do was just say a couple of things. First of all, I believe what we're talking about here, even though I wasn't here for the introduction, is how America's economy is out of whack. and perhaps pointing at the possibility of some solutions to it. That's all very well and good in a behaviorally modified postmodern society that doesn't care much about anything but that the shelves are going to be full. And as long as the shelves are full, there's not any real chance of public unrest that's going to shake any pillars up there in Washington. But what I mostly wanted to say is there's one huge elephant in this room, in this global room, that I learned about first back in 1970 when I read the Club of Rome report called The Limits to Growth.
Yeah.
I was about 6 months back from Vietnam, and it was probably the first truly important book for the rest of my life that I ever read, besides perhaps Brothers Karamazov. And what it showed was that unchecked population would continue to grow a long time, but the vectors of decreasing resources available and the overpopulation would together make unbearable, untenable strains upon this world economy, and it would eventually collapse. That is what perhaps we as activists would like to in some way mitigate, though I don't know if mitigation of the world economy's collapse is still a possibility. But overpopulation, y'all, that is the elephant, the brontosaurus in our room. And I don't have any real solutions without war that people would take. I have a solution, but people would balk at that. Even civil rights people would balk at that, which is universal necessity, and I'm going to say it before you all. No class, no nationality, no religion, nothing accepted, and those people would be the heroes. We have to drop the population of this earth, or else we're just going to breed ourselves out of existence. One of the very worst things that's happened in the last 3 years was that China rescinded its one person per family regulation. They said, no, it doesn't. They actually, as one of the two major population growers on the planet, didn't want to do anything about it. And that's the sum of what I have to say, except that I'm going to say what I have said in one article that I've written at Op-Ed News, that I'm voting for Biden because Trump is an existential threat to the survival of the planet. And I don't see Biden as that. We could have 4 more years of deadlock with Biden. We can have none of our ideals getting truly realized, but we wouldn't blow up because somebody sent a nasty tweet to the president. We got to take them out one way or the other, and I'm a revolutionary socialist telling you so.
Yeah, I just want to point out that the Club of Rome, that's a eugenics organization, and you're talking about eugenics. The last time we had a eugenics plan in force in the world was Hitler under his idea of a master race. So anytime you get into the eugenics thing, you're not talking about just eliminating populations, you're talking about eliminating problem populations that are usually identified as Black and brown people, poor people. Those are your problem populations. Those are the ones that usually get reduced. And that's certainly what Club of Rome is talking about.
Hey, has anybody read Jenny Brown's book?
The problem, of course, is who gets to decide, but that's why it has to be universal. And it's not something that I've gone greatly on record to say, because, of course, you know, there's more issues than merely the issue of will we breed ourselves out of existence because all the resources will be gone, including the Brazilian rainforest, for instance, which is just burning and cutting down. That's 30% of our oxygen exchange.
Yeah.
We're past tipping points in various places, and one of the tipping points is population, and that's
that doesn't make any sense.
In the few minutes we have left, I
Oxfam
wonder
said,
if we could talk about something that would give us a grip on something. And I mean, we know how bad things are, and we can get really detailed about how bad things are, but that isn't going to help anything.
What's the plan?
What are you
What's the
thinking
plan?
about, Peter?
What?
What are you thinking about?
I'm all ears.
Well, you know, all of this stuff came about because of us. And I'm an us, and you're an us. You know, we're not completely powerless. But look, it took a lot of power to make the mess we got here.
It took a lot of power, and it took a lot of letting go and giving up power as well.
Well, there's, you know, but if we keep blaming other people, we get into this them and us stuff. We just cancel ourselves out because there's an opposite over there who's going to vote the other way. And we're out of the game at that point.
so I'm just curious, are you guys seeing then eugenics as a legitimate answer to the problem?
Who's talking about eugenics anymore? I mean, he might have been, or he might not have been, but
Oh, I
obviously
wasn't
eugenics
talking
ain't
about
gonna do
eugenics
anything.
at all. Let me say, not guilty. I wasn't talking about eugenics at all. I was merely pointing out that if you read the limits to growth, you will see that various vectors, which include pollution, population, available resources, both mineral and vegetable, i.e., trees, for instance, are all heading in the same direction, and all the vectors are hyperbolas. They are all getting worse and worse as they approach an ever receding present, which is the y-axis. And
So look,
you're
you're telling me the sky is falling.
I'm not
and
telling
I
you the
partly
sky is
agree
falling.
with you.
I'm saying that I'm saying that we don't seem to have politicians that want to work in anything but incremental ways, and we don't have time.
But so
Bernie
what?
Sanders would indeed be wanting to work in less than
Sure he would, but
incremental ways.
he's out.
I know. Well, that's
Well, look,
that's how we
I'm
gotta
saying
get
if
rid
we're
of
going to
Trump.
sit around and bitch about this, I'm leaving.
There's a way, what we're doing right now with staying home, the pollution, there's clearly a way that isn't drastic. Incremental does work. People have to drive less, consume less, maybe be more responsible about making children. The problem is that society people aren't paying the costs, especially for carbon. Carbon
You're
use, they're not
talking as
paying
if we got lots and lots of time.
Well, what's the alternative? Revolution?
Well, I want to look deeper than that. I mean, the things that happen because of what we say, ultimately. How your life is a function of what comes out of your mouth to a large extent. And it's not, Pete Seeger said it's going to take 1 million little tiny things, little good people doing little good things. It's not just added up grains of sand. It's synergy. You can't predict the outcome from adding up the parts. But all you have access to is the part.
As I write about in my book, Bottom Up Revolution, we live in a world that is based on chaos. And in chaos theory, emergent properties can pop up overnight and become dominant. So and that always gives me hope. It gives me hope because there's a possibility that enough of us, I wrote an article this past week about how there are over 30 million people with not a lot to do who could become activists. Maybe we should be talking a little bit about that. How do we get those people to get together and join together to make something happen? Because
you'd be one. You're doing
I'll
it.
add one thing to that. Pete Seeger and I were cousins, and he's one of the reasons that I still have hope. No matter what my geopolitical analysis is, we have hope because, we we also have the reassurance of Jean-Paul Sartre, who said after World War II that the only rational response to defeat is resistance. And here we are, proof, and I've taken part in these calls before, especially with Veterans for Peace. We are still proof against the victory of the fascists.
Yeah, we do need a lot more resistance, that's for sure. Marilyn, before we finish up here, I want to make sure we hear from you. And Bob Stewart, we haven't heard from you either.
Rob, your mic seems to be very quiet.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you be closer to it? It's not coming through so loud.
I was saying I'd like to hear from Marilyn and from Bob Stewart, who we haven't heard from yet.
Yeah, I'd like to say that one huge factor in overpopulation is getting off of the Stone Age health food diet and getting onto a vegan diet. You know, you can feed about 5 times up to 20 times as many people on the same amount of land that way. It really takes the pressure off the whole system.
You know what? So what progressives are saying? You can't drive your beloved car. You can't eat meat. You can't make babies. How much luck are there going to be in that? People love their cars. They love eating meat, and they love fucking. So it's pretty hard to win. This is why the people on the right win. The suburbans love their SUVs. Sales of SUVs are soaring now.
And trucks.
But this is entertaining but oversimple.
Oh, before we, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
All right, I just wanted to say thank you very much to Rob Call for this time being able to get here. Appreciate it, man.
Well, I hope we hear from you more regularly now. And Marilyn, how about you? What do you got to say?
Well, I have a few things, but
as a vegan.
I'm also a vegetarian myself. I stopped eating meat years ago.
I'm vegetarian too.
And I'm vegetarian.
I tried to be and nearly died.
I'm a vegetarian.
Really killed you.
Seafood.
I can't help cheese.
Go ahead, Marilyn.
So, well, one thing that came up for me was the Theater of War. That's a place in New York. They, to reference what Meredith was talking about Antigone, and they're an amazing group. I saw part of a performance, and they created a performance called a contemporary performance of Antigone called Antigone and Ferguson, and it was about Michael Brown. And in Antigone, the story is about burying the body and the body being out. And so anyway, they had original music written, and I just wanted to mention that was a contemporary art form based.
That was in Brooklyn Heights. Is that where you were? Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, that was in Brooklyn Heights. Is that where you were?
It was, yeah, it was in Brooklyn Heights too, yeah. Yeah, did you see it?
Yeah.
I just saw pieces of it. It's fabulous, and I'm interviewing the guy who's the head of it. But that was one thought. I'm doing, as far as the economy, I'm doing research on pay what you will economy, and I think that's where ethics and the economics connect. And so when you have most people in today's economy, if they were presented with pay what you will, they would try to pay the lowest amount because they want to get away with something. But other cultures don't. Indigenous cultures, when they're bartering or trading something, nobody's trying to get away with the cheapest thing. What they're both trying to do together is to manage it so that it creates balance, because the concept is that if it's out of balance for me, it's also out of balance for you. And so that a little bit of economy was touched on earlier, and that's what I'm working on that. I have two more quick things. One is that the $1,200 that we all got I don't think I put this on Op-Ed News, but I put it on Facebook, that buried in that law was the money for the 1%, and over 40,000 people at the top of the economic scale in the United States also got an economic stimulus, and they each got $11 million each, which if it was divided up among families in the United States, would be $13,000 per family. So hopefully we're going to do something about that. But the last thing is the coronavirus. I'm actually doing a workshop on that. It's full, which I'm really excited, an online workshop. But it's, you know, I think there's, I interpret a lot of life as if it was a dream. To get other levels of meaning, like if I was dreaming about a coronavirus, what would that be? And so corona is about the crown, and a virus, actually the job of a virus is to create, it's an evolutionary, creates evolution. And so in spite of the fact that a lot of things look bad about the coronavirus, on a symbolic level, I have to know that it has to do with evolving us to what? What would a crown be? Well, could be the crown chakra. It could be spiritual development. It could be taking on our crown, or our who was it? Peter was talking about, you know, not being a victim and being responsible, and you know, part of that is, you know, you're either going to be a victim or you're going to be responsible. I mean, you can't be both. You know, if you're going to blame everything on somebody else, you're giving your power away to them. So what are we doing? Maybe we need to take the crown of our own power and give up. You know, in my experience, I find that the thing that people die for and kill for the most is to claim onto to continue to be able to claim their own victimhood. That's the last thing people will give up. And so, yeah. So, yeah, it is. They want to know that they're not responsible. And so maybe there's something symbolically in this about taking on our crown of responsibility. And that's it. That's all I have to say.
Good. That's plenty. Yeah, plenty.
Well said.
Well said.
Oh, wait, one more thing. I hope you read my article today.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. About Tara Reid.
Yes, about Tara Reid.
And that's my last sentence was about ethics.
And I'll give you the comment I was going to add, except I
Okay.
won't say it in polite company, but I was going to add a comment.
Oh.
Oh, I
Hey,
saw.
everybody should shamelessly self-plug here. So I put one up today too. I think it's in number 20 or so.
Cool. Thank you for your contributions.
Berlin, I also, Dave Peer here, I also made a comment to that. I don't know if you read it or not, but I think it ties in a lot with what Meredith said too. So
yeah,
I've just been listening with an open mind, and everybody said a lot of things to think about. So
yeah,
but I think Meredith probably started off with some good points there that about ethics and truth and things of that sort.
Here.
And your article, Merlan.
yeah. That was my punchline. It was that it's all about ethics.
Read my comment.
I probably did it, and I will go back. I'll check, make sure.
All right, so it's we're at this for an hour and 10 minutes. We're going to get winding down. Any last thoughts?
Rob, I think it would be really good to have a question or a topic at the beginning to start with, and people who are coming to the meeting could give you their ideas ahead of time in the email, and you could pick one. But I think that would get us started off a little more efficiently at the beginning, so we can jump right in quickly.
I second that. I second that motion.
We'd all be talking on top of each other too.
Well, I think that's great. So there's like a core group of people now who have been coming pretty regularly. Send me stuff, and I'll put it together, and we'll have a list, and I'll put it in chat right at the beginning. We can get a good start that way.
That's good.
That's excellent.
Okay.
Well, thank you all so much. This was a record turnout. We had 18 today, and everybody stayed through the whole time. I mean, that's really rare in Zoom. So great to have you all here. And
my business is destroyed. I haven't. I've had to cancel my Italian tour. I've probably have to cancel my Spanish tour. I've had nothing to do but isolate myself, grow my garden, and write a song or two.
And if you don't know, Bill Homan is Watermelon Slim. He's a blues guitarist who's played all over the world. Really worth checking out his music on YouTube.
I want to get in touch. Probably play with some people you know.
I had 2 Blues Music Award nominations, including for Best Record of 2019. No Blues Music Award, just virtual. And I had a new record coming out. It's in the stores, except you can't go to the stores.
I think we shared a stage many years ago at some point.
Are you a musician too, Peter?
I was.
Yeah, cool.
When I had the nervous system for it.
What'd you do?
Well, God bless you all, and everybody stay safe.
Yes, and I'm going to end the meeting now. We've been at it for almost an hour and 15 minutes. Thank you all, and next week.
Thank you, Rob.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.